Thank you for choosing the Eyegaze Connect. In this video, we'll be showing you how to control mouse movements like scrolling, clicking, and dragging, as well as tapping, which is the same as clicking, and swiping, which is the same as dragging. The mouse control page behaves the same way a computer mouse does, with a few extra features we've added to make it easier to use with eye tracking. If you're used to using a desktop computer with an external mouse, this should feel familiar. It may feel a little different compared to using a laptop or smartphone because there are some gestures that cannot be done with a mouse, like multi-finger swipe or touch gestures. For example, on MacBooks and iPhones, you can zoom out on photos by pinching with 2 fingers. There are ways to zoom out with the keyboard. It's simply a matter of getting familiar with the keyboard shortcuts instead of the touch gestures you may be used to. There are different hotkeys you can use depending on the device, software, and even the version of the app you're using. Make sure to check with your device manufacturer or the respective app's help resources if you'd like to learn about them. To access the mouse controls, open up the Eyegaze Connect page in your Eyeworld and navigate to the mouse page. On the top of the screen, there are 3 mode buttons. These are to change what the directional arrow keys do. The rest of the buttons on this page serve the same function regardless of what mode you are in. For this video, we are demonstrating with an iPhone, but all 3 modes work the same way whether you are using an iPhone, Android, MacBook, laptop, or Windows desktop computer. First, let's go over Step Mode. Step Mode moves the cursor on the device you're controlling by 1 step each time you click once on the directional arrow buttons. The cursor on my iPhone screen is a blue circular indicator at the bottom right corner. On your iOS device, your cursor may be a different size, shape, or color. If you would like to change the appearance of your cursor, please refer to our Help Desk article. Please note, on iPhones, once you stop using the directional arrow buttons for a little while, your cursor will disappear. The cursor will come back when you start using them again. When you click on the left arrow button, the cursor will move to the left. Currently, the step size is set to 3. Say you increase it to a 5 and select the upper left diagonal arrow button, the cursor will now make a larger jump. If you decrease the cursor step size down to 1, you will see the cursor move in smaller steps. In summary, Step Mode will move your cursor 1 step at a time when you click a directional arrow button, and you can change the step size of your cursor based on how large or small of a step you want it to make. Next, we will learn about Speed Mode. When you select the Speed Mode button at the top, you will see it is highlighted in blue, and the other 2 mode buttons are gray. Speed Mode is available only when using Eyegaze to interact with Eyegaze Connect and is not supported with other access methods. If you're unfamiliar with Speed Scroll, we recommend watching our Eyegaze Connect setup and pairing video on our YouTube channel to get familiar with the Speed Scroll feature. Essentially, in Speed Mode, when you click on any of the directional arrow buttons and look off your Eyegaze Edge screen, the mouse will start moving in the selected direction and will continue to move until you look back at your Eyegaze Edge screen. Under the step size adjustment buttons, you will get a message telling you to look off the screen to begin moving your cursor. Once you have selected a directional arrow button, if you look at the Eyegaze Edge screen for too long, that directional action will be cancelled. This is helpful in case you hit the button accidentally. Now, if I select a directional arrow button and look off screen, the cursor appears on my iPhone screen. As you see, the cursor is now moving diagonally across the screen. The key thing to remember is that the mouse cursor keeps moving until you look back at the Eyegaze Edge screen. Here, I'm moving the cursor in the other direction. Changing the step size in speed mode has the same effect as in step mode. It is not changing how quickly the cursor moves, but instead how large of a step it takes. In summary, in speed mode, the cursor will begin to move only when you look away from the Eyegaze Edge screen and will continue to move until you look back at the Eyegaze Edge screen. Now let's go over swipe mode. To understand how swipe mode works, let's review mouse clicks. Swipe mode combines 4 separate actions. One of them is a left click and hold. On Windows or Mac, this means pressing and holding the left mouse button, while on a smartphone or tablet, it's equivalent to tapping and holding. In other words, a drag action works the same way as a swipe. So when you are in swipe mode, what you're essentially doing is clicking down the left mouse button, moving the cursor, releasing the left mouse button, and then moving the cursor again in the opposite direction of what you initially selected. For example, if you click the right arrow button, it would tap or click, swipe right, release, and then return back to where you started. On many devices, especially iOS, we cannot tell the exact position of the cursor when clicking these arrow buttons. All we know is the cursor moves in the chosen direction, then moves back in the opposite way. So if you swipe and hit the edge of the device, the cursor may overshoot and return further than its starting point. Now let's see this in action. We will use step mode just so we can see where the cursor is on the iPhone screen. To make it easy, we will place the cursor at the bottom center of the screen. We will switch back to swipe mode. You will see the instructions and label change based on the mode you are currently in. Now, we hit the right arrow, and you can see that it's trying to drag the screen over to the right. Clicking on the left arrow tries to drag the screen over to the left. Also, the cursor returns to where it started on the screen. In this case, the swipe didn't result in any action, and that is due to the step size. Currently, we have a step size of 3, which in this case is not enough to switch pages. The step size in swipe mode is dependent on the screen dimensions of the device you are controlling. Here, we are controlling an iPhone 14 Pro Max, which is a little bigger than a regular iPhone, but a lot smaller than an iPad. So for this iPhone, when we increase the step size to 5 and swipe left, we can now switch pages. However, if we swipe right, it does not work in the same way. This is because the cursor was already on the right edge of the iPhone. For reference, if you were to place your finger where the cursor is and swipe right, you won't have much space to move your finger. Swiping with the Eyegaze Connect works in the same way. You will also notice that the cursor doesn't end up in the same spot it started at. Therefore, when you swipe right, but the cursor does not have any space to move right, it will attempt to swipe right and then move in the opposite direction with a step size of 5. This will make the cursor move all the way to the left side of the screen. So, it is important to remember that when you are swiping, you should place your cursor where you would normally place your finger on your iPhone to begin swiping. For example, if you want to switch pages on your iPhone by moving left, your cursor will need to be on the right side or the center of the screen. Please note, swipe and drag are essentially the same thing. On the mouse control page, there are drag buttons that will give you more control over where the cursor goes after the left click is activated, whereas swipe mode will only let you move in one direction. You can click and hold, then drag in any direction you like to give you more control. For example, when you're trying to select some text. When using drag on iOS and Android devices, it's helpful to understand that smartphones can interpret gestures differently based on how long the touch is held before swiping. When you turn on drag and take some time before you start to move the mouse, it will be interpreted as a touch and hold action. For example, when done on an app, instead of drag, it will open the Edit menu. If you get into this mode, you can use the Home button to go back to the mouse control page. So where can drag be more useful than swipe? We will use the Notes app to show how drag can be useful. Let's leave the cursor right on the word reliable. You'll notice the note isn't in edit mode yet. To bring it into edit mode, you'll single-click once and notice the text insertion point blinking in the middle of the word reliable. Now that you are in edit mode, double-click directly on the word reliable. You will notice the gold drag handles appear at the top left and bottom right corners of the selected word. Now, move the cursor so that the gold dot on the bottom right is centered with the cursor, and then turn on drag. From there, increase the step size and move the cursor down. You'll see that the text below is being selected. While still in step mode, but with drag activated, it behaves like swiping. The advantage of this is that you can continue swiping, selecting, and deselecting even portions of individual words without needing to release the left click. This shows the difference between swipe mode and drag. With swipe mode, every time you click a directional arrow button, it clicks and releases once the action is complete. With drag, it only releases when you tell it to. You'll notice that the drag button is still highlighted. Once you are done selecting the text, you can click the drag button again. Now, the text is released, and you can do whatever action you want to do with the selected text. For example, to copy the highlighted text, move the cursor over to the copy button and single-click. This will work the same way whether you are on an iPhone, Android, or a word processor on Windows or Mac. The only difference would be that in Windows and Mac, you don't need the selection indicators. You can simply drag to select text. Now let's go over the other mouse click buttons. We've already seen how to use single left click. Single right click is used primarily on Windows and Mac to open context menus and are generally not used as an action on iOS devices. Double right click is uncommon on most devices. However, if an app supports it, it can certainly be used. The same applies to right click and drag. On an iPhone or Android device, a double left click would be like a double tap. On Windows and Mac, it can be used to open files or folders. We'll use the Photo app as an example. Typically, when using touchscreen on your iPhone, to zoom in or out of a photo, you would use a pinch or spread movement with 2 fingers. Because we're using a computer mouse, this will look a little different. Let's go over how to do that by using just the mouse click buttons. Select step mode so you can use the directional arrow buttons to move the cursor over. Now, single click on a photo. Next, move the cursor to the center of the photo where you wish to zoom in. Clicking the double left click button will zoom into the image. From there, it's also possible to drag the image by selecting the left click and drag button. To zoom out, simply click the double left button again. Lastly, let's go over the scrolling options and how to use the Control and Alt buttons. Starting from the bottom, the pan buttons are context-specific and are only supported on certain apps and operating systems. When supported, the pan buttons work like a horizontal scroll wheel would on a computer mouse. The Control and Alt buttons are for users that want to be able to control-click to select multiple items. Alt has its own particular uses depending on the application. Step scroll and speed scroll work a lot like step mode and speed mode, but the concept would be applied to the scroll wheel on a computer mouse. Think of step scroll like moving the scroll wheel 1 notch. Speed scroll is a feature that moves the scroll wheel continuously while you are looking away from your Eyegaze Edge screen. Here on the iPhone, we have Safari open with a website. Using the Step Scroll Down button, you can scroll down the page. And to scroll up, you can use the Step Scroll Up button. There are multiple ways to scroll on a website. Here, we will show you swipe mode, different from Step Scroll Up. First, move the cursor to the top center of the iPhone screen and select swipe mode. Let's say you want to scroll up. When using your fingers, you would touch the screen near the top and move downwards. Since swipe mode is similar to touching and dragging, to scroll up, you would swipe down. You can see that it's scrolling up a little at a time. If you increase your step size, you can make bigger swipes. Be conscious of where you are placing your cursor before swiping, and make sure you have enough space on the screen to complete the swipe. For example, if you are in swipe mode and the cursor is at the bottom of the screen, you cannot swipe upwards. If you are on an iPhone, this will sometimes activate reachability mode, as you can see here. Other areas of the screen you want to be conscious of is the top right and top left corners. If you place the cursor at the top right corner and swipe down, you may unintentionally open your iPhone's control center. If you place the cursor at the top left corner and swipe down, you may unintentionally open your iPhone's notification center. For either scenario, select the Home button to return to the web page. Scrolling can sometimes vary because it is context-specific. As we've seen, on iPhones, it pays attention to where the cursor is in regards to where you want to scroll. On Windows, Mac, or any other device that uses multiple windows, you may need to put the window that you want to scroll through in focus first. You can do that by single-clicking in an empty space within the area you want to scroll. Here, we will demonstrate this on the iPhone. We will single-click on an empty space on the screen, and as you can see, step scrolling works. Now, when you move the cursor down to the bottom of the screen to the search bar where it currently says eyegaze.com, the cursor is on the Safari controls instead of the web page itself. So now, if you try to step scroll, the web page does not move. Therefore, in order to scroll on a web page, your cursor needs to be in the area you want to scroll. Another way you can scroll through a web page is by dragging, which will work on most devices. You would move your cursor to a spot on the web page where there is no clickable links. This is because, if you recall, drag is really just a touch and hold, so clicking the drag button while the cursor is over a hot link will open it. Once the cursor is placed, turn on drag and click on the down directional arrow button to move the cursor downwards. Once it goes to the bottom edge of the screen, you can see that the web page slowly scrolls downwards. As you move the cursor closer to the edge of the screen, the scrolling speeds up. It's continuously scrolling as it selects the text, and the further you move the cursor down, the faster it scrolls. Please note, there may be situations where a drag to scroll may not work. In those cases, you can use swipe or step to scroll. Different scroll methods are better suited for different situations. After reviewing these various methods, you can try them out and determine which one works best for your scenario.